So you want to know if you can film a military installation? Well, no, you can't. Usually. Let me explain. So why can't you film a military installation? Nazis. And the Italians. And Soviet Russia. Don't worry, it'll all make sense in a second. In 1919, Benito Mussolini formed the Fascist Party, and over the next few years, gained an immense amount of political power. On October 28th and 29th of 1922, Mussolini organized a march into Rome. Ding. Almost 30,000 soldiers loyal to the Fascist Party marched into the city, and the King of Italy, fearing a civil war, decided to offer the position of Prime Minister to Mussolini. Of course, Mussolini took it, and over the next few years, basically made himself in charge of the country. Now this was a pretty big deal, not just because of what it did to Italy, but also because of who it inspired. Now I don't know if you've ever heard of a man named Adolf Hitler, but if you haven't, he was a bit of an asshole. He saw the Fascist Party and said, wow, there's some really great ideas. Plus, look at that march on Rome. You're saying I can just march a bunch of soldiers into the heart of a city and they'll just surrender it to me? World War II, Paris, France, 1939. So he took the parts he liked, and he made the National Socialist Party. After gaining political power through that party, in 1933, he was made the Chancellor of Germany, and in 1934, became the Führer. So both of these countries basically came under fascist control. And America was watching this and thinking, this isn't really great. We're not huge fans of what's happening in Europe, especially since Germany conveniently forgot to read in 1935. So in 1938, the same year that Germany reclaimed the Sudetenland, which they had lost in World War I, the United States House of Representatives formed the House Committee of Un-American Activities to combat the threat of fascism. This committee was in charge of finding subversive or disloyal activities and then just nipping it in the bud. You see, they didn't want fascism to inspire citizens to rise up against the government. In 1939, World War II started, and in 1941, America became directly involved. In 1943, Italy surrendered, and in 1945, Germany surrendered. With the surrender of Germany, fascism stopped being a threat, but that didn't mean there weren't still threats in Europe. It was communism. You see, Soviet Russia had an incredible amount of troops, and they occupied an immense amount of land. The Soviet Union had taken over a lot of territory that it did not own before. America saw this as a problem, because America and Soviet Russia did not get along. While America and Soviet Russia were debating the merits of communism versus capitalism, sparking a Cold War, the House Committee of Un-American Activities were taking action. They shifted the focus from fascism to communism, and new laws were created. For example, 18 U.S.C. 795. The threat of spies was very real, and military installations were a pretty big target for spies. The federal statute prohibits anyone from photographing a military installation that has been declared by the president as requiring protection from the general dissemination of information. But that raises the question, what bases has the president declared protected? It's all in Executive Order 10104, which was issued by President Truman on February 1st, 1950. That particular executive order states that any base that has been declared restricted, confidential, secret, or top secret requires the protection that is listed in 18 U.S.C. 795. Executive Order 10104 also references 18 U.S.C. 797, which states that if you publish the photographs that you took of a military installation, it's also a crime. If you find yourself outside of a military installation, you'll likely see signs that declare the base restricted. On those signs, it doesn't always reference 18 U.S.C. 795. Sometimes it references the Internal Security Act of 1950. Technically, just saying that the base is restricted is enough for 18 U.S.C. 795, but that doesn't mean that the Internal Security Act of 1950 isn't also important. The 1950 Internal Security Act, which was also called the McCarran Act after Senator McCarran, which was its biggest sponsor, was created by the House Committee of Un-American Activities. The act covered a lot of things. It made certain un-American activities illegal. For example, you were no longer allowed to picket a federal courthouse. The act also gave a lot of authority to military commanders, allowing them to make laws to protect the security of the installations that they controlled. President Truman did not like this act. In fact, he vetoed it, claiming that it made a mockery of the Bill of Rights. However, both the House and the Senate overturned that veto. It turns out President Truman wasn't actually wrong when he said the act made a mockery of the Bill of Rights. Certain sections were removed for violating the Constitution, such as one part that made it illegal for members of the Communist Party to get passports. However, most of the bill still remains in effect, including Section 21, the part that gives authority to military commanders. Essentially, giving commanders authority over anyone on their installation. That includes soldiers, civilians, anyone. Now you might be thinking to yourself, well, as long as I'm not on the military installation, I'm fine, there's a fence line, I just don't go on the fence line, I'm okay. Well, here's where it gets spicy. That federal property often extends past that fence line. Not good. You may be thinking to yourself, this man is full of baloney. How dare he tell me that you can limit the First Amendment? It's the First Amendment. It's the very first one. That means it's most important. Well, actually, there are a lot of things that limit your First Amendment right. For example, you can't yell fire in a public building. That's a limitation on your right to free speech. You can't stay in a public park with your friends after it closes. That's a limitation on your freedom of assembly. You can't sacrifice babies in the name of your religion. That's a limitation on your First Amendment right to freedom of religion. And you can't film a military installation. That's a limitation on your freedom of press. All of those limitations have been determined to be reasonable, which is why they're allowed. If you really want to film the base, contact them. They can give you everything you need to know. In fact, they might let you film without any problems. Some bases will let you film anywhere that's not an access control point from the outside. Some bases let you film as long as you're not using a telephoto lens. If you want to find out, you have to talk to them. Don't just go there and start filming and hope for the best, because you might get arrested and you have no one to blame but yourself. I get it, it's a lot of information, it's pretty confusing. If it doesn't make sense to you, here's my Twitter. Ask me a question, send me a message, I'll do everything I can to help you out. And until the next time, be good, stay safe. Ding!